welcome to this video about Chordjam, billed by Audio Modern as the ultimate chord machine. Apps like Chordjam are great tools for learning about music theory, but even if you have a good working knowledge of music theory, they can take you to places that you wouldn't normally go, perhaps suggesting chords that you wouldn't have thought of, or taking you off in new musical directions, and as such, they can be thought of as creative compositional assistants. So with that in mind, I thought I'd use Chordjam to create a track in a style that I wouldn't do normally, and see where it took me. Audio Modern were good enough to supply me with a copy of Chordjam, but with no strings attached. However, this isn't a review or a tutorial of Chordjam, it's more like an experiment to see where it can take me musically. So with no preconceived ideas, I'm going to create an orchestral style track, as that definitely is a style that I haven't experimented with before. A few months ago, I downloaded Spitfire Audio's BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover, which is a very reasonably priced version of their full BBC Symphony Orchestra library, and at the time of recording is available as a free download if you register with Spitfire and are willing to wait 14 days. I haven't used it on a project yet, so now's my chance. For this project, I've loaded 5 instances of Spitfire's BBC Symphony Orchestra and Omnisphere. On track 1 is Chordjam, and underneath that, I've set Omnisphere and all the other tracks to take MIDI input from Chordjam. Chordjam defaults to C minor, which is fine for this experiment, and all I've done is change the chord type from minor 7 add 11 to a more straightforward minor 7th to restrict Chordjam to 4-note chords. So, with Omnisphere set to the factory patch Adagio Espressivo, I can get a rough idea as to the chords that I want to use in an orchestral type setting. So I've set Omnisphere to record ready, Chordjam is all set to go, and let's have a listen to some of the chords. So by playing the C on my keyboard, I'm generating a C minor 7th chord, F gives me F minor 7, G gives me G minor 7, and to keep the scale in key, the A key generates a G sharp major 7th chord. So now, having set Chordjam and Omnisphere tracks to record, I'll just press single keys on the keyboard to trigger the chords. So in order to give different inversions, I could have set the octave setting for each of the 4 notes in the chord either an octave higher or an octave lower. I just left them as they were. I have randomized the velocities slightly to give a slightly natural feel between these 2 values. And the onset of the notes, the timing, I've adjusted between these 2 values, between spot on and just a slight delay of the notes, again to give it a bit of variety. And you can see by those notes I've played slightly ahead of the beat. But what I've done for the rest of the arrangement is I want them to trigger, I'm going to use the arpeggios rather than chords to generate some of the more symphonic sounds. So what I've done is I've tightened up the timings of the notes themselves to ensure that they don't overlap and they're quantized correctly. This won't give me an overly quantized feel because I've randomized the values earlier, but it will ensure that the arpeggios start and end at the right time. So to do this, I just selected all the notes and used the legato setting in Cubase MIDI editor, and each note you'll see starts directly the last note finishes, and it keeps everything neat and tidy for the purposes of this experiment. So now I've selected a cello section from the BBC Symphony Orchestra with the articulation set to spiccato. So if I open Chordjam and monitor on this track, a simple up arpeggiation set to a quarter note gives us this pattern. After to record this pattern, I simply set this track to record and record the pattern itself. For the next track, I wanted to stay at the bottom end of the spectrum, so I selected the brass horns and set it to a long articulation. Within Chordjam, I reduced the timing to a half, and the rate rather to a half, and set the arpeggio, left the arpeggio in the up pattern. You are, of course, free to select anything you want, and you can do it on the fly as well. Let's audition this and see what it sounds like. Yep, I'm happy with that. Let's record that track now. For the next track, I selected some Pizzicato Strings and selected the up and down arpeggiator in Chordjam and set it to 8th notes. I opted for a flute section next, set to a long articulation, and set the arp in Chordjam to down and up. So with the flutes recorded, I thought that the pizzicato made everything a little bit busy, so I've just got the pizzicato coming in at the end here. Let's listen to the tracks all together. For the melody line, I'm going to go for a trumpet section set to a long articulation. What I'm going to do is set loop record to on and basically leave Chordjam looping round and round while I basically mess about with all the different settings. I'm going to use the randomize, I'm going to try different rates, and then what I'll do is I'll pick apart the notes and use my own judgment as to which random events or which chance events that I've selected work together. So now I've edited down all the various takes, and as you're doing it, the end result is never quite a cacophony because, of course, every note is in key. So I've edited out the superfluous notes, but left in some of the harmonies, as you'll eventually hear. Of course, this is where you can take control and repeat phrases, select little runs, and create results that are unique to your taste. So this is really the result of the experiment. So as the end result sounded a little more like a brass band rather than an orchestra, I repeated the experiment, in the same key but with slightly different settings. For the lead sound, I doubled up the brass with a combination string sound created in Unify. Unify lets you layer VSTs and much more, but in this case it was simply a layer of 3 Korg VSTs set to string-type sounds. So let's have a listen to the end result. So in summary, I think Chordjam did take me off in different musical directions that I wouldn't normally go. And whilst it's true that you could achieve similar results using different arpeggiators creatively, the ability to adjust arps on the fly, randomize note timings and velocities within limits you set, all whilst following your own chord progressions, is a great combination. Chordjam has quite a few other tricks up its sleeve. I haven't even touched on the sequencer section, but that will have to be for another video. So for now, I'd like to finish by thanking the over 2,000 people who've subscribed to the channel. Many thanks, and do let me know what sort of content you'd like to see more of in the future. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, it's free, and you'll be notified of future releases if you select the bell icon. So until the next video, thanks for watching.